Tonight, the White House calls off a meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. The pair were due to meet in Hungary, but now the US president thinks neither side is ready for peace. That's as Washington sends in its 3 top negotiators to Jerusalem to protect the fragile Gaza ceasefire. Coming up, we're going to focus on another war, America's war on drugs, now being fought in the Caribbean Sea. 32 people killed in 7 military strikes. Donald Trump says he's targeting so-called narco-terrorists. Tonight, we ask, is it legal? Plus, Japan's new leader, she plays the drums, rides a motorbike and models herself on Margaret Thatcher. But will she change her country? And the Oval Office on Mar-a-Lago, how Donald Trump is turning the White House gold. That's all coming up on The World with me, Anna Botting. Hello, good evening. Last night we brought you details of another White House clash between Vladimir Putin, and Donald Trump. Angry words were exchanged. It appeared that the presidential opinion was swinging towards Moscow. The presidents of Russia and the United States were due to meet in Hungary within weeks. That summit has now been postponed, maybe even called off completely. Well, this is how the Ukrainian leader responded.
Лінія фронту може бути початком дипломатії.
The front line can spark diplomacy. Instead, Russia continues to do everything to weasel out of diplomacy. And as soon as the issue of long-range capabilities for us, for Ukraine, became less immediate, Russia's interest in diplomacy faded almost automatically. This signals that this very issue, the issue of our deep strike capabilities, may hold the indispensable key to peace. The greater Ukraine's long-range reach, the greater Russia's willingness to end the war. These weeks reaffirmed it. The discussion on Tomahawks turned out to be a major investment in diplomacy. We forced Russia to reveal that Tomahawks are precisely the card they take seriously.
Well, let's bring in our US correspondent, David Blevins. The suggestion from the White House is that neither side is ready for peace. But what do we know about what's changed, David?
I think what's changed is that European leaders have intervened again, as we suspected they might. You'll remember when President Zelensky emerged from the White House last Friday and went straight into a call with European leaders. I asked him if it was because he felt he needed their support again. In other words, if he felt isolated. He gave me a very diplomatic answer, but today those European leaders, Sir Keir Starmer among them, published a statement urging Washington to hold firm on its demand for a ceasefire from Russia before there are negotiations about territory. And we now understand that the NATO chief, Mark Rutte, is on his way to Washington for a meeting with Donald Trump tomorrow, presumably to hammer home the same message. So diplomats are suggesting that the summit's been postponed because Russia's not prepared to agree a ceasefire, and therefore Washington is not prepared to agree to a summit that could produce nothing. It does now seem that the meeting between Trump and Zelensky last Friday was very significant. There had been reports of a heated exchange. The Ukrainian ambassador to the United States is now conceding that there was candid dialogue between them. You can't be indifferent, she says, when lives are being lost. So we're witnessing a kind of tug of war between the two sides. Sometimes Russia is winning, and sometimes Ukraine and its European allies are winning in the battle to influence Donald Trump, because the White House is claiming a call today between the Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was productive, but it certainly didn't produce a date for a meeting even between them, never mind a date for a meeting between the US and Russian presidents.
David, thank you. Well, now from one conflict the US president is trying to end to another he claims to have solved. Donald Trump's deputy, Vice President J.D. Vance, said the ceasefire in Gaza is going better than expected as he visited Israel today. It follows a flare-up in violence which threatened to derail the truce, with Israel launching a wave of airstrikes on the territory after accusing Hamas of killing 2 of its soldiers. Our Middle East correspondent Adam Parsons has this report.
The Vice President landed in Israel to try to calm fraying nerves. Donald Trump's name is all over the ceasefire agreement, and America doesn't want it to fail. We followed him to the south of Israel, where American teams are planning their part in Gaza's future, whatever that may be. The ceasefire has been stretched over recent days. Here Vance called for calm and patience.
I don't think it's actually advisable for us to say this has to be done in a week, because a lot of this work is very hard. It's never been done before. And in order for us to give it a chance to succeed, we've got to be a little bit flexible. I think what you're seeing from our Gulf Arab friends, certainly from our Israeli friends, is a certain amount of impatience with Hamas.
Do you now believe it is feasible to have a governance structure for Gaza that does not include strong Palestinian voices?
We need to make sure that both the Palestinians living in Gaza, but also the Israelis, are able to live in some measure of security and stability. We're doing all those things simultaneously. And then I think once we've got to a point where both the Gazans and our Israeli friends can have some measure of security, then we'll worry about what the long-term governance of Gaza is.
Vance knows that the reconstruction plans are still vague and ill-defined, but nations, including Britain, are now joining forces to offer help. This building where J.D. Vance was giving his comments from is an important part of the story, because this is being designed as a coordination centre between the civilian authorities and the military. As and when Gaza is rebuilt, the plans will be drawn up here. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, Trump's trusted emissaries, are also in Israel, meeting freed hostages. This is a display of US diplomatic heft and a warning that whatever happens, the White House wants this ceasefire to work. Humanitarian aid is getting into Gaza, but it's still well below the target. The crucial Rafah crossing remains closed. For many in Gaza, the joy that a peace deal was agreed has been replaced by the fear that it might fail.
We are praying to God that this truce holds, that it lasts long enough for them to let in the essentials of life, meat, medicine, everything we need. The pharmacies are empty and the market prices are sky high. Anyone who tells you things are cheap, they're not. Life is really difficult right now.
Life in Gaza remains desperately hard. These people were queuing to get cash from a bank that reopened, but most left empty-handed. This is a land of sorrow and of splits, cut in half by these blocks. On one side, the Israeli military is in control, and on the other, 2 million people, now corralled into just half of Gaza's grey land. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, now to another war being fought by Donald Trump. Since September the 2nd, the US military has been targeting vessels off the coast of Venezuela, attacking 7 boats and killing 32 people. The White House says they belong to drug traffickers transporting their contraband to the United States. Well, strikes like these carried out on a speedboat last month are, if you listen to Donald Trump, a matter of national defence. He says America is in armed conflict with drug cartels. They are terrorists. Anyone killed in international waters has been designated an unlawful combatant.
To every terrorist thug smuggling poisonous drugs into the United States of America, please be warned that we will blow you out of existence. Each boat that we sink carries drugs that would kill more than 25,000 Americans.
But there's a bigger picture here, which is being tracked by our data and forensics team, one of an American military build-up. At least 10 warships and a nuclear submarine deployed. More than 4,500 Marines, several B-52 bombers and F-35s all converging on the region. Because even though Donald Trump claims this is a war on drugs, there is also a longer-term aim, regime change in Venezuela. He wants to depose this man, Nicolas Maduro. But there's now growing unease on both sides of the political divide about his methods. We'll discuss that tonight, as well as the legality of Donald Trump's tactics. Well, let's bring in our first guest tonight, then, US Senator Jack Reed, who is the top Democrat on the Armed Services Committee. Good to see you. So are these attacks necessary, in your view, to keep America safe from narco-terrorists, to use Mr. Trump's terminology?
Well, narco-terrorism is his term. But there's been no substantiation of the legal basis for these lethal attacks. Also, when we just captured two of these so-called legal or narco-terrorists, they were returned to their home countries. I think if they were truly narco-terrorists, they would have been arrested by our forces and processed through our legal system. So we are not getting the kind of information we need to justify these operations. In our system, Congress has the sole authority to declare war. The president can't step in and assume that we are at war with different groups. So this is very questionable, and it's also questionable from a national security standpoint. This is a very expensive operation, and it's not in response to a true military threat to the United States.
Well, indeed, expensive it is, because as well as the airstrikes, an unprecedented number of warships have been deployed, along with spy planes, fighter jets, bombers, drones, US Marines off the coast of Venezuela. I mean, what is the intent here? How concerned are you that deployment could lead to active engagement?
Well, there's a possibility of active engagement. Once again, though, I would hope that the president would recognize that Congress is the authority to declare war and authorize a significant engagement of American military forces. I think a lot of this was the Trump administration trying to create the impression of being able to destroy the drug trade throughout the hemisphere. Ironically, the majority of drugs coming into the United States come through Mexico, not Venezuela. And so this is really, I think, a solution in search of a problem. It's not a military solution. It should be law enforcement. We have, through many, many decades, intercepted vessels carrying drugs, done it through the rules of international engagement, and where appropriate, arrested the occupants of the boats, and where not so, return them to their home countries. But this is, I think, more of a demonstration for the benefit of his base than it is a true national security crisis.
Well, is it that, or is it an effort to unseat the president of Venezuela?
Well, he is talking about that. And certainly Maduro has been someone who has defied the democratic norms of Venezuela, who's not treated his countrymen justly and fairly. But the United States it should not be in the business of changing governments by military force. We've seen over the last several decades our attempts to do so in Iraq and other places. And ironically, it's turned out to be a long, drawn-out affair in which we might win a quick conventional victory. But then the question is, what do you do when you win? And usually it ends up to be a very expensive, very frustrating, and very controversial ending.
You say law enforcement should be deployed if this is a fight against drugs, but it is actually the military at the moment. We know the commander of Southcom has stepped back, resigned, concerned about the legality of this and wanting to go more cautiously than Pete Hegseth. I don't know if you've spoken to military commanders as part of your committee role. Are they concerned about this action, which, firmly one might argue falls outside due process?
Well, we have a military that is sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And this sometimes gets to be a very difficult choice because they are also uniformed officers who are in the chain of command, and the president is the commander-in-chief. There are, I think, elements within the military who are asking very serious questions about the legality of these efforts, not only for their own benefit, but to protect the troops that they lead, because they could be subject to some type of criminal charges if these are, in fact, violations of law. But I think what they're trying to do more than anything else is to make the case that these military operations are not the best way to achieve the goals of the administration, if the goals are, as they state, to stop the transmission of drugs from places like Venezuela and Colombia. But there is, I think, a growing sense that unless there's a further justification, and more particularly, unless there is a presentation to Congress and approval by Congress of these activities, we're getting deeper and deeper into an area that is possibly and likely extrajudicial, and that's not where they want to be.
Senator Jack Reed, much appreciate your time there, ranking member of the Armed Services Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, the view from Washington there. Let's focus now on the Caribbean country of Trinidad. It's less than 7 miles from Venezuela at the closest point. Fishermen ply their trade off its coast, and 2 of its citizens have been confirmed killed in the US strikes. The country's prime minister has welcomed those strikes and says drug traffickers should be killed violently, and the families of those who died think differently.
How would decide what that man to kill innocent people, boy? And people and their family crying, boy. Crying, boy. People crying, boy. I'm telling you, people crying, boy. Why don't I destroy family?
Well, I'm joined now by David Abdullah, a Trinidadian politician who's an executive member of the Assembly of Caribbean People. We said there the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago had expressed support for US strikes, saying the slaughter of our people is fueled by evil cartel traffickers, suggesting that those traffickers should be killed violently. Do you agree?
Good evening. Thanks for having me, Anna. No, I don't agree, because as the Senator just said, those are extrajudicial killings. Not even in open warfare between 2 countries, and one army captures soldiers from the enemy, can they line them up against a wall and summarily execute them. That's a crime. It goes against the Geneva Conventions and is a crime against humanity. So you need to interdict, you need to arrest, seize the evidence, and try people in the court of law. That is the rule of law. Those are the international norms, and we cannot cross those boundaries, because if you cross that red line, where does it stop? And so, no, we don't agree with that position whatsoever.
I mean, the problem is Trinidad is so close to the border with Venezuela, isn't it? First of all, how's it impacting people's behaviour? And second, is Trinidad doing enough itself to stop any relationship with drug trafficking?
Well, people in Trinidad and Tobago obviously are concerned about it, that 2 of our citizens were killed. I don't know what they were doing, and I can't vouch for what they were doing, but regardless of whatever they were doing on that boat and what they were up to, they should not have been killed in that way. People are going about their business quite normally. There was some concern over the weekend when the US Embassy issued a statement saying that Americans should not go near the US Embassy and so on. And that created a certain amount of concern. But outside of that, we are going about our business normally. But the Trinidad and Tobago government, together with other CARICOM governments, have ongoing collaboration with the United States and with Britain and with France and with Holland with respect to drug interdiction in the Caribbean. And so the officers of the Drug Enforcement Agency based here in Port of Spain, the ATF agents are here, and there's shared intelligence. There are drug busts that result from shared intelligence, and that is the way to go. If the US wants to step up the war on drugs, and if Trinidad and Tobago sees that as being necessary, which it is, then there should be more resources of drug enforcement nature in terms of additional Coast Guard vessels and so on allocated to the Southern Caribbean to stop the vessels. But as the Senator said, the majority of cocaine coming out of Latin America goes through Ecuador, from Colombia to Ecuador and up the Pacific coast. And fentanyl, certainly, President Trump talked about fentanyl being blown up with those boat strikes. Fentanyl does not get produced in Venezuela, does not get trafficked this way. And so those things are pure fictions, and really is a narrative to cover up the real intent, which is regime change, which the American media reported last week. Senior administration officials admitted is the real game.
Well, indeed, the US has had a long-running difficulties with Venezuela. I mean, would your government support regime change in Venezuela?
This government has been silent on that question. They have not stated explicitly that they recognize the government of President Maduro. This is a new government which came in at the end of April. The previous government clearly recognized President Maduro, as do all the other governments of CARICOM. The Prime Minister currently, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, when she was in opposition, recognized Juan Guaido as the president of Venezuela, which of course was a farce and was a nonsense. But so she's had a long-standing position, even when in opposition, now in government, of not recognizing President Maduro. But if she wants to deal with, for example, the issue of getting gas from a Venezuelan gas field known as Dragon gas field, she has to deal with those who are in Caracas, and those who are in Caracas are President Maduro and his cabinet members.
And just back to the question of drugs, the US president claims that each boat strike saves the lives of 25,000 Americans, even though fentanyl, as you mentioned, which led to, nearly 50,000 US deaths, I think, last year, came from Mexico. But do you acknowledge that this route has become a transit point for drugs, partly because of the porous border between Venezuela and Colombia, and something needs to be done about it?
There's always been a certain amount of trafficking in drugs out of Colombia. Some of it comes through Venezuela, some may come through Guyana into Trinidad and Tobago or go to the Eastern Caribbean. That's been going on now for very many years. But it is a minute amount compared to the 80-something% that goes via Ecuador and another 8% that goes via the Western Caribbean. So there is a problem of drug trafficking that has to be dealt with, but it has to be dealt with through legal means, through collaboration of law enforcement agencies and the arrest, interdiction, and trials of persons, and not through summary execution, which is effectively extrajudicial killings.
Very good to have you on. David Abdullah, political leader of the Movement for Social Justice, joining us there from Trinidad. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
So can the US really claim to be acting in national defence? To answer that question, let's bring in Brian Finucane, a former US State Department lawyer who is a specialist in the laws of armed conflict. You might have heard our senator and our guest there from Trinidad both expressing concern that this is extrajudicial killing. Is it legal?
No. There is a term for premeditated killing outside of armed conflict. That term is murder. And there's no plausible claim that these strikes are being taken in national self-defense or the defense of Americans against an imminent threat. I think it's good to hear your prior panelists speak back out against the narrative about this being counter drugs or counter narcotics, and specifically about this being counter fentanyl. That's a bogus narrative being put out by this administration. And I think it's being put out not just for the benefit of the public, but potentially for the benefit of the president himself, to redirect President Trump away from doing strikes in Mexico, which could actually be against fentanyl, and to the strikes in the Caribbean may be something of a consolation prize, where the president gets to perform, dramatic military action against supposed terrorists, but without the harmful foreign policy consequences that would come from actually bombing fentanyl labs or cartel members in Mexico itself.
Well, the family of one of the Trinidadians killed in one of the attacks, Chad Chapo Joseph, have suggested that under maritime law, the appropriate action is to stop the boat intercepted, not just blow it up. What should be done here?
Yes, that is the long-standing playbook that the U.S. Coast Guard and U.S. Navy, working jointly, have used to stop, interdict, board, search these vessels, and where necessary, take into custody people aboard the vessel. If there's probable cause, arrest them and process them through law enforcement procedures, the criminal justice system in the United States. It is not to use lethal force against them in the first resort.
Well, Senator Rand Paul, who was a congressman who unsuccessfully tried to force the Trump government to get congressional authorization for these strikes, suggested actually that 1 in 4 of the boats intercepted by Coast Guard did not contain drugs. Therefore, it could mean 25% of the people being killed might be innocent. Is it the potential here that innocent people are dying in extrajudicial, unlawful action? And if so, what is the comeback towards the Trump administration?
So I want to say that no one aboard any vessels has been convicted of any crimes by the U.S. government prior to the use of lethal force. But in the standpoint of U.S. law, they're all innocent. There is no armed conflict. These people are not combatants in armed conflict in the United States.
Well,
And therefore,
even though the Trump administration has declared, it says it's, in a war against drug cartels.
Again, this is another bogus narrative put out by the administration. Just because they say it doesn't make it so, okay? And in many cases, they've not identified the supposed, group that the United States is targeting here. That's the truth for the vast majority of these strikes. And so this implicates, murder statutes under U.S. law, the crime of murder on the high seas, the crime of conspiracy to commit murder outside the United States, and murder under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, Article 118.
But who would bring that action?
Well, we can't say what's going to happen in the future, but these are the sorts of considerations that the U.S. government ought to make, and the sort of considerations I would have advised on when I was in government prior to undertaking military operations, counterterrorism operations. Ultimately, it's up to the U.S. Congress to push back against these unlawful actions by the executive branch. These actions are not authorized by Congress, and these actions which appear to run afoul of U.S. criminal laws.
This is such a top-down government, as you know, the executive taking control of matters like this. Is Congress powerless at the moment?
No, it's a question of political will. It's a question of members of Congress executing their constitutional responsibilities. And it's a question of the American public holding the members of Congress accountable and enforcing them to do their jobs, frankly. I also want to emphasize that
Sorry, I interrupted you. Do go ahead.
These actions in the Caribbean we're seeing, I think they not only serve the function of, performative, military strikes to amuse the president, but they are a form of saber rattling against the government of Caracas. The Secretary of State Rubio is driving U.S. military deployment to the Caribbean, driving U.S. policy to very much wants to regime change in Caracas. And the concern is that as President Trump has hinted, that these strikes may move to land, that the U.S. may start striking supposed narco-terrorist targets in Venezuela itself as a further step to coerce Maduro to step down.
And just very quickly, watching what's happening off the coast of Venezuela, does it leave people asking where might be next?
Absolutely. The concern about striking in Venezuela, to further steps taken to try to force Maduro from power, or even to target Maduro directly. That would be illegal. It's not been authorized by the U.S. Congress. It'd be deeply unwise.
Brian Finucane, a former U.S. State Department lawyer, we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, you're watching The World, still to come. From the Champs-Élysées to Le Centre prison, a defiant Nicolas Sarkozy becomes the first former president to serve time in jail. She loves heavy metal and rides a motorbike. Meet Japan's first female prime minister.
a secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war.
This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back. Nicolas Sarkozy has become the first modern French leader to go to jail today, beginning a 5-year sentence for conspiring to fund his election campaign with money from Libya. The former president continues to protest his innocence and was greeted by hundreds of supporters as he was taken to prison in a police car. So how did it get to this? Here's our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins.
Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy is starting a 5-year prison sentence. He's the first French leader to go to jail since the Second World War. Here's what we know. Nicolas Sarkozy was France's president between 2007 and 2012. A man known for his swagger, he was often in the papers, photographed alongside his glamorous wife, model and singer Carla Bruni. But today he's starting a 5-year prison sentence after being found guilty of conspiring to raise funds for his 2007 election campaign from Libya. As he got ready to be locked up, the former Conservative president greeted supporters walking hand in hand with his wife near their home. His sentence follows years of legal battles and a previous corruption conviction. Sarkozy's always denied the allegations and was acquitted of personally receiving or using the funds. So what's it like to be a former president in jail? Well, according to French media, he's going to be kept in the isolation unit of Le Santé jail. The prison has housed several high-profile inmates, including a Venezuelan militant known as Carlos the Jackal, who carried out several attacks on French soil. Inmates are held in single cells, which are usually 9 to 12 square meters. They're kept apart in their cells, the yard and activity room, but Sarkozy will have access to a TV and a landline. So how has he been preparing? Well, his lawyer told French media that he's packed jumpers and earplugs to help protect him from the cold and the noise. He's also packed several books, including The Count of Monte Cristo, which of course is a novel about a man who was wrongfully imprisoned and then takes his revenge. As he starts his sentence, his son called a rally to support him. Adoring fans shouted his name as a long post online declared he was innocent. Sarkozy has said he isn't afraid and has vowed to fight to the end.
Well, this is the world. Next up, industrial revolution or dot-com style bubble. We visit the US data centers powering the AI boom to find out.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
Welcome back. Artificial intelligence is creating the biggest boom in economics right now, accounting for the vast majority of growth in the US so far this year. And while some believe we're witnessing a new industrial revolution, others fear a dot-com-style bubble on far larger scale. Our economics editor, Ed Conway, reports now from Virginia, home to the highest concentration of AI data centres on the planet.
If you ever fly to Washington, D.C., look out of the window as you land at Dulles Airport, and you might snatch a glimpse of the single biggest story in economics right now. Those big buildings may look like warehouses, but what they are actually is data centers, the biggest concentration of them anywhere in the world. Artificial intelligence might be a bubble, more on that later, but for the time being, it's creating a boom, a massive boom you can see in plain sight down at ground level. Because if you want more AI, you need more data centers, big buildings containing big computers that do the calculations to train and run the models you might sometimes use. And here, in Loudoun County, there are more data centers than anywhere else on the planet.
From the outside, they kind of just look like any other buildings, or like a big flat kind of distribution centre, the kind of thing you sometimes see on the side of the motorway in the UK. But all of this around here, these are all server centres, they're all data centres, basically as far as you can see.
Access to these server centres is very rare, but Sky News has been given permission to see inside one of them in the heart of Data Centre Alley.
So the whole building is a data center, but each of these is data halls, are
Correct.
they?
Yep.
And so within each of these areas, you've got different customers that have their own, all of their servers in there.
Yeah. So you could have, this room could be a single customer, or it could be multiple customers that have bought different size spaces within there.
This building is run by Digital Realty. You might not have heard of them, but they are one of the biggest data center companies in the world, running servers that power nearly all the major AI and cloud services anywhere.
The fingerprint sensor as well?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
What you're seeing here is a very special room, a place those AI companies visit to see how their server racks can plug into a site like this.
From here, the customer has control. Under the floor and beyond, we have the controls.
So power and cooling are the two key kind of...
Yeah, they go hand in hand. Power generates heat. I need to be able to reduce that heat by cooling.
It's not for nothing that these days AI capacity is measured in megawatts and gigawatts. This is all about power. A single one of these racks can suck up more power than a small village.
Now, when you think about things like AI, you're probably not necessarily thinking about the physical underpinnings, but it is a very physical thing. When, AI is training, when you're asking it questions, it's going to servers like this. In fact, that there is the GPU, so that's where the heavy thinking happens. You can see it's an NVIDIA GPU, and then you've got the storage, and then you've got all of the other parts of this entire cabinet. And the striking thing, when you look at these cabinets, is just how much they need when it comes to power, just how much they need when it comes to cooling. And you see the cooling here, because beneath the floor, there are all of these pipes, supply and return pipes, each of which is plugged directly into the GPU to pass coolant around to make sure that these incredibly high temperature operations don't damage the chips. It is an extremely complex, energy-intensive operation, but this is what it takes to power the future.
The demand for more centres like this has sparked a huge expansion, unlike anything ever seen before. A few miles away, Digital Realty is building a brand new centre, a very big one. Now, what you can see behind me, each of these is a backup diesel generator in case the power goes down. And what we're talking about in this site, which is still under construction, and you can see the works over there, is potentially energy consumption of as much as 1 gigawatt. And to put that into context, that is about the size of a large nuclear power station for this site. And it's just one of many, underlining just how much power right now is going into AI. Here's one insight that gives you a sense of how big a deal this is. On the surface, it looks like the US economy expanded pretty quickly at an annual rate of about 2% in the first half of this year. But now subtract all the investment associated with IT and data centres, and look, GDP would have been just 0.1%, nearly recession territory. Raising the question, what if this boom goes bust? That is precisely the thing worrying central banks like the Bank of England and, just last week, the International Monetary Fund.
There are echoes in the current tech investment surge of the dot-com boom of the late 1990s. It was the internet then, it is AI now. We're seeing surging valuations, booming investment, and strong consumption on the back of solid capital gains. There's also the flip side of the boom. Markets could reprice sharply. This would reduce wealth, consumption, and investment, lower activity, and could spill over to broader financial conditions.
For those inside the AI world, this also feels like uncharted territory.
I mean, the kind of terrifying thing is no one knows how much further AI is going to go, and no one really knows how much economic growth is going to come out of it. The trends have certainly been that the AI systems we are developing get more and more sophisticated over time, and I don't see signs of that stopping. I think they'll keep getting more advanced. But the question of how much productivity growth will that create, how will that compare to the absolutely gobsmacking investments that are being made today in capital for those training runs and for building those more advanced systems, whether that's going to pay off is very hard to say.
Whether it's a new industrial revolution or a bubble or both, there's no denying AI is a massive economic story with massive implications for energy, for materials, for jobs. We just don't quite know how massive yet. Ed Conway, Sky News in Virginia.
Well, this is The World. Next up, demolition at the White House as work starts for Donald Trump's new ballroom. We take a look at the £186 million plans.
Those vivid colours of summer have faded now, but the trauma for everyone who witnessed what happened here hasn't gone away.
Devastation that we lost 3 of them.
Ruda Cabana's guilty pleas mean they won't have to relive what they saw in court, but everyone here tells you they'll carry it for the rest of their lives. You see people running red lights time after time after time. This is an offence that sometimes has the most awful of consequences.
When you speed through a pedestrian crossing, there is a risk that you could batter somebody to death. She filled our lives with light. She was innocent, she was happy.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
He had a beautiful death. He fell asleep in my arms. This is about a dying person's choice to die peacefully when they want to, on their terms.
Go ahead, back white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No, he did it very affectionately. Daddy, you're my daddy. Thank you.
Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left.
It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding. It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
Founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Over the next 45 days, an estimate 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional. This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. We take you to the heart of the story in the largest democracy in the world.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Japan has elected its first female prime minister, shattering a political glass ceiling while setting the country up for a clear pivot to the right. Sanae Takeichi is a hardline conservative who is known for wearing blue suits in homage to her political hero, Margaret Thatcher. It is expected she will take a tough stance on immigration and boost military spending. Well, she is a frequent visitor to the Yasukuni War Shrine in Tokyo that many view as a symbol of wartime aggression, and she sought to play down Japan's role in conflicts. Outside of politics, she's known for playing the drums to relax, and she's a heavy metal enthusiast who idolises bands like Black Sabbath, Deep Purple and Iron Maiden. She is also a fan of motorbikes, but is said to have given up her beloved Kawasaki when she entered politics, reportedly to avoid accidents that might hamper her work. Well, I'm joined now by John Nilsson-Wright, Professor of Japanese Politics and the International Relations at the University of Cambridge. Welcome to you. Goodness, she certainly sounds interesting, does she not? How extraordinary, first of all, is it that Japan now has a female Prime Minister for the first time?
Well, it is unprecedented, and I think it's a measure of just how challenging the political times are for the governing Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. The new Prime Minister has broken a glass ceiling, and I think that's partly a function of the gradual decline in the power of the governing Liberal Democratic Party. Back in July, we saw an election to the upper house, which I think surprised most seasoned observers because it represented a breakthrough for what you might describe as right-wing populism. And for the Liberal Democratic Party, which has been grappling with a series of practical problems, allegations of financial corruption, problems with the cost of living crisis in Japan, voters feeling increasingly disaffected, alienated, left behind, themes that are very, very much common to countries that are grappling with the challenge of populism. It was natural that in the face of that, the LDP, concerned about its long-term survivability, would decide to opt for a candidate who would, if you like, insulate the LDP from the appeal of these new populist parties. The challenge for Ms. Takaichi is, she faces the same practical governing challenges that her predecessor, Mr. Ishiba, faced. How is she going to manage relations with the United States at a time when Donald Trump, who's soon to arrive in Japan, has been putting acute pressure on Japan through his approach to tariffs? How will the government deal with the challenge of pressure for increased defense spending in a more hostile environment, with the challenge of North Korea and China, of course? And how will the new Prime Minister keep her fragile coalition together? In order to secure the votes to be elected Prime Minister, she had to do a deal with a smaller, even more conservative party. And so her challenge is both on the domestic level and internationally. So she will need a lot of agility and political sophistication, I think, to navigate between these competing challenges.
Yes, I think Donald Trump hailed her as a highly respected person of great wisdom. So perhaps that's a good start. I mean, this was a simple majority, wasn't it, in the lower and upper house? Would she have won a popular vote amongst the people, do you think? Or are they not ready for a woman? I mean, much of the comment has been that she's upholding the patriarchy. So maybe they don't see her in the same way as a gender glass ceiling breaker.
No, and I think it's probably fair to say that, I mean, obviously it's dangerous to generalize, but there have been prominent female politicians in the past. Back at the end of the 1980s, the then Japanese Socialist Party elected a woman, Takako Doi, who was nicknamed the Iron Butterfly, another nod in the direction of Margaret Thatcher. She, of course, was on the left of politics. The very fact that Takaichi-san has conservative credentials mean that she can't really present herself as the voice for women's empowerment. But there is a reality that she's functioning in a very male-dominated environment. The test will be really how she delivers. And in that sense, I suppose we should see her as a gender-blind candidate, and that's probably as it should be.
Yes, that's fascinating. And in terms of what she has to do now, you mentioned the international relations part of it, but very quickly, the state of Japan's economy, cost of living, etc. What does she need to do just quickly?
She needs to cut taxes. One of the issues that has been a key issue for ordinary voters is reducing the consumption tax, giving ordinary voters a sense that their economic livelihoods will be protected. At the moment, of course, the yen is significantly undervalued, and this is creating real pressures in terms of the cost of living crisis. And don't forget, looming in the background is the question of Japan's very high levels of debt. How she manages that while at the same time meeting all of these demands in terms of defence expenditure is a huge circle to square.
Yes, sounds a familiar story, does it not? Dr. John Nelson Wright, sorry to cut you off. They're running out of programme. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Now, Donald Trump has made clear that he wants to take the White House into the Gilded Age, gold leaf in the Oval Room, a makeover of the Rose Garden, and now he's tearing down part of the East Wing to build a new $250 million ballroom funded by wealthy donors. Have a look.
We're building a ballroom. They've wanted a ballroom for 150 years. And I'm giving that honor to this wonderful place. And this room holds 88 people. And the new one will hold 999 people. You probably hear the beautiful sound of construction to the back. You hear that sound? Oh, that's music to my ears. I love that sound. Other people don't like it. I love it, Josh. I think when I hear that sound, it reminds me of money. Great place. We call it the Rose Garden Club. And it's a club for senators, for congresspeople, and for people in Washington. We never touched a rose. The roses are in full bloom, and they will be in full bloom during certain seasons. In the Oval Office, we brought back pictures of some of the great presidents. Many of them were in the vaults for over 100 years. Very high marks, but it's interesting. People walk into that room and they look around the room. They don't even want to talk to me. They could look at it for hours.
Donald Trump's extreme makeover of the White House, which right now is marking Diwali. Donald Trump surrounded by Indian businessmen and women. Well, that is the world for this evening. Do stay with me for Sky News at 10, coming up next.